The reality is I came in with no name ID. Most people didn't know my name, let alone know how to pronounce it. I wasn't even expected to make the debate stage. I beat a vice president, multiple former U.S. senators and current senators and governors. So I'm proud of what we achieved. But at the same time, I didn't achieve my goal of receiving the nomination and being the next president. And one of my learnings from that campaign was that there's a lot of distractions along the way. There's a lot of things that'll pull you off of your original purpose. Don't cede to that temptation. So as it relates to the race right now, which you bring up in the Democratic convention, I think one of the things that's missing in this race right now is a rigorous debate on policy. You do get a lot of Democratic criticism of Republicans and of Trump in particular, including even that clip of Bill Clinton that you played, that it's built around a cult of personality. I see a little bit of projection right now, and right now we see a campaign that's built mostly around style rather than substance. And I do think Americans are going to be best served if this is an election built around competing policy visions for the future of the country. And I do think right now that's missing, if we're being very honest, from the Kamala Harris campaign and the Democratic campaigns more generally.
And not from the Trump campaign? Cult of personality? Really?
Well, look, that's why I bring it up. Like it or not, Trump has offered deep policy specifics, from everything from a vision for a cryptocurrency and digital assets framework all the way to his specific proposals of what tariffs he would or wouldn't impose, a clear position on how to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a clear position on mass deportations in this country, and exactly what he would do to seal that southern border. You may or may not agree with the policies, but he has offered policy specifics at a level that we have not heard from Kamala Harris. And I do say this, I think it's accurate to say this. I think right now, so far in her campaign, it's early, but I think the media has been covering for her absence of policy specifics in the same way they were covering for Biden's cognitive deficits for the course of 3 years. And I do think Americans are left off worse as voters when we don't get those hard answers. So my advice to voters across the country would be, assume that her positions are what they were when she ran for U.S. president in 2020. That wasn't a long time ago. And if so, we ought to be having a debate about abolishing private health insurance, about taxes on unrealized capital gains, about the Green New Deal. That's the debate we need to be having, but we're not. And I think Americans are less well served as a consequence.
All right, guys. So we got to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy pulling up on the communist protesters outside of the DNC and taking them to school. Okay. And Vivek, I think that he's one of these guys that is showing us through his actions that he really is presidential, right? I really am hoping that come 2028, whether Trump wins or loses, that Vivek is the front runner for taking the MAGA movement into the future, okay? Because I think that he's probably the brightest mind and one of the most fearless minds in the movement. And videos like this are exactly what I'm talking about, okay? Because this guy just pulled up into the lion's den, okay? Especially considering how Vivek is a libertarian, which is kind of basically the opposite of a communist, right? If you think about it. He decided to actually speak with these people that he disagrees with, to hear them out, to listen to what they have to say. And I want to react to it because it really does show you how the left in this country is not very tolerant, even when people are willing to put a hand out and to say, hey, let's just talk about it. Let's sit down. Let's discuss the issues. They don't really seem to be that interested in having real conversation. They're just making demands because what they really want is their communist revolution. That's what they really want. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Absolutely. What's this one about?
This is our paper. We write this and we produce it monthly.
How much is this?
Also $5.
Right here, bro. All right. We'll give you a second $5. Sorry. Thank you.
Let's work together.
Cool. Thank you. So let me ask you, here's my issue. This is one of my issues with Kamala Harris. I want your perspective on it. I think she has two issues. She has not stated her actual policies. And the reason I respect somebody like Bernie Sanders more than I respect Kamala, and I've said this numerous occasions, I'm not saying it just right now, is if you have convictions, at least stand by them. If you believe in single-payer health care, if you believe in an effective national health care system for all, then stand by it. But why adopt those positions 4 years ago only to back off of them today? I could disagree with you, but at least have the position and stick to it. That's sort of what my criticism is. And my suspicion is there might be some counterintuitive alliances between the so-called far left and actually segments of the so-called far right that want to stay out of foreign wars, that want to end crony capitalism and lobbying and government capture, to say that, you know what, there might be ways where you may not agree with 100% of what I say or what Donald Trump says, but you don't have to agree with 100% of what somebody says to think outside the box and vote a little bit differently. What do you think? I actually, you said I am here to listen a little bit, so I'd love to hear your guys' perspectives on why you're here and why you have your own disappointments with the current direction of the...
This is going to be able to represent us. They can't be pressured into representing us because we don't pay their bills, we don't pay Kamala's, Trump's, we don't pay yours, because they all have financial backers. That's why we need a workers' party to take down the two ruling class parties, one that doesn't have funding from these big businesses and is instead funded by its membership.
Yeah, I mean, you realize the convention here, I mean, I don't need to preach to you then, but I mean, who buys the sweets, right? Talking about populist talk from the floor of the convention, stand up for the workers and break up the very companies that are sponsoring the whole event, right? So there's a bit of a paradox there. But, all I would say is...
A paradox in what exactly?
Of controlled rhetoric, right? You have a lot of corporate interests controlling the way in which they actually assail those very corporate interests, which is kind of interesting. It is. I think we might be saying something similar. It's all a bit of a charade.
Yeah, I would say one thing that is definitely we're not similar on is you were talking about unification of like the far right and the far left. There is no.
Well, I don't know about unification, but there may be some common threads.
Well, we would say this: there is no perfect American communism, American socialism like this. These other little parties popping up. It has to be international. We aren't here for the success of American working class, because the only way we can be there for the success of the American working class is the international working class in Canada and in Mexico. If you had some, and now we don't believe in this, but let's say there was some perfect, socialist America, it would immediately get pushed out by China, by Russia, by Europe. So we need an international socialist revolution in order to secure a true victory for the working class.
Woo! Vivek, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so these guys, they're communists, right? They have a global agenda, which is probably why they're so concerned about the whole Palestine thing. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But Vivek was bringing up an interesting point that if these people weren't so dumb, they'd actually kind of understand where he's coming from, in the sense that if you're saying that, well, we can't really have much influence on the system and policy and what gets done because of money interest in politics, which is what this guy said, right? Both parties are bought and sold, which is true. It is true. Then you would think that it would make sense that if both extremes agree on this, right, the far left and MAGA, if both sides kind of agree on that, then hey, wouldn't it make sense to come together and at the very least to do something on this issue that we agree with, right? And that is something that could get done if both sides would stop arguing long enough to put real effort behind getting politicians, getting people in office who are committed to ending the corruption. Like, for example, banning lobbying by politicians who get in Congress and then after they're done, they go and work for some corporation, get a big payday to turn around and to lobby their buddies, right, on behalf of corporations, okay, to ban stock trading, at least for individual stocks. I don't mind, politicians buying mutual funds and stuff like that, because I think politicians should be broadly invested in the outcome of this country, right? So I think it makes sense to let politicians buy mutual funds and broad-based indexes, but not to trade individual stocks, okay? I think that we could do something about that. I think that there are a lot of things that we could do, maybe term limits as well too, if the right and the left, okay, the populist versions of both sides of the political spectrum can actually come together and say, hey, let's work on these issues, right? Let's put our differences aside. Let's work on these issues and get it done. And then we can disagree on the other things, right? In regards to, communism or whatever. We could make those disagreements, but hey, let's actually try to get something done when it comes to the things that we might agree with, right? But see, again, part of the reason why you can't actually do that is because when you try to reach out to the communists and you say, hey, we might have a little bit of an agreement on some things, okay, let's see if we can work something out. Nah, they don't want to hear it, right? You have to agree with them 100% or else they don't want to hear from you, right? Which, again, is part of the reason why, nothing ever gets done.
Woo! Vivek, what are your thoughts on reparations for Black Americans?
So here's my perspective. I was asked about this when I came to the south side of Chicago a year ago, and my position on this has not changed, is I'm against race-based reparations because I think it will create more division,
What about race-based discrimination that occurred in this country for
the last let me just clarify one aspect. I think there was a time and place for it in the Reconstruction era. But today, when we actually bring back racial reparations, it actually causes greater discrimination, not more. I think we're seeing a rise in anti-Black and I think other forms of racism in the country. But part of the reason I think we're seeing it is there's no better way to foster racial animus than to take something away from someone based on their skin color.
So don't give black people justice because it'll make other people upset.
Well, because it's going to create more division and be self-defeating. I think it's actually going to set black Americans back because it will cause. I mean,
but black Americans continue to live in that setback.
I want to move out of I want to move out of the middle of this just because I feel like. So let me say this: you're not going to be able to solve. You are not going to be able to solve this problem under capitalism. You're always going to be coming up with these little band-aid issues. That is why the only way to truly get reparations for the indigenous people, for the black Americans in this country, is a socialist revolution. Is by seizing the means of production and letting that community give themselves reparations. We don't need to be asking for, oh, please, God.
So I'm curious.
Yeah. So you hear this communist idiot, right? Which, I mean, he's just like, he's very stupid, right? Because if we actually lived in a communist society, right? Black people, everybody would be much worse off, okay? Because we've seen this experiment tried time and time and time again. Actually, under capitalism, that has allowed black people to have a quality of life that is significantly better than any other black person on the planet, right? Black Americans are the most well-off black people, okay, African people on the planet, period, right? Period. There's nobody doing better than black Americans, and that is because of capitalism. So when these people run around talking about reparations, you owe me this, you owe me that, well, I mean, listen, if you look at where a lot of the government funds go to in regards to welfare and government assistance, hey, I think that black people are disproportionately benefiting, right? More so than the amount that black folks are paying in. And if the whole point of reparations is to try to right the wrongs of the past in the sense that you are trying to pull people out of poverty because they're in poverty due to the systemic discrimination, then wouldn't it make sense that, hey, you know what? These people who happen to be in poverty, they're getting a lot of the welfare, they're getting a lot of the government assistance. Wouldn't that be kind of like a form of reparations, right? I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I know some people say no, right? But realistically, you're not going to get anywhere close to reparations outside of welfare, right? That's the closest that you're realistically going to get, because any reparations policy proposal, okay, if it happens to pass Congress, which again would be damn near impossible, right? Let's say it actually was passed, it would get immediately shot down in court due to the 14th Amendment, okay, the Equal Protection Clause, which basically states that, hey, everybody is equally protected under the law, which means that you cannot have the government favoring one race over another race. Like, you can't do that, okay? And this is something that basically was confirmed when the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action, okay? So anybody out here talking about, oh, we need reparations and vote for Kamala because of reparations, they're selling you a pipe dream, right? It's not happening. There's no real plan, okay, for reparations. The activists have no clue what they're doing. They're just leading people astray. That's what's happening with reparations, okay? And honestly, you know, it's better to tell people the truth rather than to sell them this idea that something's going to happen that's never going to happen, right? So, you know, people are wasting their time anytime they ask a question about reparations. It is never, ever going to happen in this country. It's not going to happen. And the more time that passes, the more that is guaranteed that it's not going to happen, okay? So,
as to what you're doing here, are you a supporter of the genocide against the Palestinian people?
I am an American who is actually here to listen to the views of people who disagree with me. Now, one of the reasons I'm supporting a candidate in this election.
Of Israel?
I support the United States, and because of that, I support Israel and our relationship with them.
You support a genocide that has killed 40,000 Palestinians in the last 10 months.
So look, I think that the truth is there was an attack that precipitated it.
No, the truth
and we can't
is,
ignore
listen,
that.
Dude, I don't play those kinds of games. I'm an organizer. I'm not one of your.
I'm also pragmatist.
I'm not one of these people.
You're not a party.
I'm not an acolyte of yours.
You're not a partisan.
I'm not an acolyte of yours, and I'm not a hack for you or for the Democrats or for the Republicans or nobody else.
I got you.
I'm asking you that you have no right to be here if you're not in support of the Palestinian people.
Well, I think
and if you're not going to call for an end to a genocide.
You have the right to be here.
If you're not going to call
so do we in
for an
return.
end to the genocide, and an end to the killing and an end to support of Israel, then you should take off. We don't want you here. You're not welcome here.
Well, the good news is we're America, and so we actually get to all express ourselves peacefully.
You get to express being a racist?
You get to
express being a racist Zionist pig? Is that what you get to express?
Wow. Amazing how this guy jumped straight into racism, right? So you got this guy who appears to be white calling Vivek Ramaswamy, who's Indian, a racist because he does not, support the Gaza protests, right? I mean, this is really something, okay? This is what happens when you're not interested in hearing any counter argument or any worldview that might be different than yours. You're just interested in screaming at the top of your lungs and trying to force this communist revolution to happen. And that's what this is all about, right? This is why these people support Gaza so much and the Palestinians, because they see the conflict between the Palestinians and Israel as kind of a metaphor for the communist class conflict, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, right? And the worker class, okay, they're going to rise up against the capital class, the oppressed. They're going to rise up against the oppressors and they're going to take over, okay? And then you're going to have a utopia, right? This is what they see in the Palestine or Palestinian Israeli conflict, right? So this is why you see the Arabs that support the Palestinians. Okay, I understand why they would support the Palestinians, right? Like that's your people, okay? So I totally 100% get that. But these people, they're just supporting it based off communist political ideology, right? That is what is going on here. So, yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating stuff.
American, but I believe in your right to speak. I believe in your right to speak your mind.
Do you believe? Racists go home! 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 How about that?
Yeah, so they're basically rushing Vivek out, right? Because they were triggered by the fact that he didn't bow down to the mob, right? And their demands that, hey, you have to support our movement or you can't be here, okay? But once again, as you can see, the so-called liberal, tolerant, loving left is not very liberal. They're not very tolerant, and they're not very loving. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.